everyone. It is Thursday, May 3rd, 2018, in the beautiful and sunny city of Portland, Oregon. Is it Carla today? Yes, Carla, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Fish.
Here.
Saltzman. Udaley.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good afternoon, Robert.
Hello, Mayor. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings, so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. Could you read the first item, please, Carla?
Item 428, accept findings from Portland United Against Hate on hate crime and incident reporting procedures pilot project.
Commissioner Udaley, can you kick us off, please?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Portland United Against Hate is a coalition of community-based organizations, neighborhood associations, and concerned Portlanders who came together in November of 2016 to build a response to the increased fear felt in many marginalized communities. I'd like to reiterate what I said to many of you in the reception preceding today's council session. Community-based organizations are key players in our efforts, and Portland United Against Hate has the potential to become a model for how government and community can work together to create more welcoming, inclusive, and safer communities for all. Today's report will detail the results of the $40,000 pilot project, which was funded last year and has informed the coalition's current work with the $350,000 they were awarded last year. I would like to introduce our first set of presenters who will get us started. Carrie Coe, Program Coordinator for Portland United Against Hate in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. Alice Perry from Latino Network. And Eric Ward from the Western States Center. And while we wait, I'd just like to welcome Eric back to Portland and congratulate him on his new position. Welcome, everyone. Please state your name for the record.
Thanks. Let's see if I can get this PowerPoint. Great. So my name is Carrie Coe. I am the program coordinator with Portland United Against Hate. I'm going to put this into full screen, if I know how to do that.
I think slideshow.
Oh, thank you. You all know what you're doing from the beginning. Great, thank you. So Portland United Against Hate, as you said, is a partnership between the City of Portland and the community, and you've all been very supportive of this work so far, so thank you for that. PUA was given, as the Commissioner said, a $40,000 grant last year to run a pilot project, and we are here today to report back on the outcomes of that grant. You authorized the pilot grant to begin the process of collecting data, to begin the process of addressing how to collect data on hate incidents happening throughout the city. policy. The community took that money and spun it into a project that laid the foundation for a modern, responsive, and people-centered system of collecting information that we are calling the Hate Incident Tracking Tool. And beyond that, we are creating a holistic system that supports those being targeted and builds resiliency community-wide to respond when hateful acts interrupt our lives. So what you'll hear today is what we did with that original pilot grant, how it laid the foundation for our work, and a testimony of a few people who were impacted by that pilot. You will not be getting the full report on our current grant funding, the $350,000 grants. That will come this winter. So today we're just focusing on the pilot. And today our presentation is in 3 parts. First is this panel, and we'll be offering some context. I'll share a bit about the city's role and how this work is meeting ONI's goals, and then Alice Perry, who is the Community Programs Director at the Latino Network, co-founder of PUA and a current co-chair, will talk about the community context of how the pilot was created. And finally, Eric Ward will speak to the national context and value that this model that we saw exemplified through the pilot, the value of that. Eric, as you probably know, is a national civil rights strategist working to counter the manifestations of organized hate. But he got his start right here in Oregon, I just learned, as an organizer with the Community Alliance of Lane County, and now serves as the executive director of the Western State Center. So that's us. The second panel will be people focused on the pilot project findings and how it laid the foundation for our current work. And then the final panel is testimony from community leaders and city staff who will update you about the impacts of the project. So let me just jump right into this, how we are thinking about the city's role in this partnership. So PUA is community-led, but this is a partnership with the city, and the city has an important role to play. Hate violence, as we know, is not compatible with a safe, livable, and inclusive city. Hate exists in Portland under a thin veneer, and it pops up abruptly and violently to remind us that in some ways Portland's shiny reputation speaks not to the real safety of marginalized communities, but to the power of silence and segregation. This is what PUA is addressing head on. We are creating opportunities to end that silence, both for those affected and for those witnessing what's happening. And we think that this is the city's role too. Hate, in a lot of ways, is actually no different from other disastrous incidents that happen. We might not be able to stop the feelings of hate between people, just like we can't stop an earthquake, but we can mitigate the impact, we can support those affected, and we can be prepared. We can prioritize resources that support communities in building resilience, both with and without the city. I'll offer a quick teaser of the primary findings and the outcomes from the pilot grant. There's a thing that's starting. Some sort of final important update is alerted. How about we postpone?
There you go.
Great, thanks. Thank you for helping me with this. So a few outcomes that I'll offer. This will mainly be the focus of the second panel, but we found and know that hate goes beyond crime, that people underreport hate acts, and that hate is poorly tracked. The outcome of this finding from the pilot project is the Hate Incident Tracking Tool. It's a direct manifestation of the pilot grant, and this tool will be a valuable resource for the city through the data that we'll collect, but also a resource to direct people towards when hate incidents happen. And you'll hear from Shweta Murthy, the lead on the pilot project, about that. The second finding is that people resource themselves when crisis happens because there's a mammoth gap in services. This led to our second outcome of building a trauma-informed support system that surrounds the tracking system. And Justin Henderson from Lewis and Clark College will talk more about that outcome and strategy. And third, we found that communities need capacity to be able to respond and prepare. That communities are under-resourced to take on this additional and specialized work. We're pairing our data and support systems with a proactive community engagement strategy. PUA is doing trainings, intervention, prevention work, which you'll hear more about from Suleiman Noor of the African Youth and Community Organization. Finally, these findings together tell us that an appropriate approach to hate tracking can encourage people to respond, can support and help heal the trauma, and can allow for us to be better prepared. The pilot was instrumental in detailing those findings to create the outcomes that we're operating from today. So the data tracking and support strategies that were developed as a result of the pilot are scheduled to be beta tested starting later this month, while the community engagement work is already well underway. The pilot, of course, led to our current funding, and what we've seen so far is that PUA is a model for ONI. We're enhancing and supporting and contributing to the Bureau's goals, and here's how we're doing that. The first goal of ONI is structures for inclusion, and PUA was created by community advocating for structural change for a community-centered approach to hate response. And this is a critical evolution in our approach to addressing hate. Data collecting and analysis is informed decision-making, and the data may be used by ONI, the community, others to identify hotspots and provide the information we need for policymaking. The second goal is adaptive governments, and PUA is created and is holding shared space for solving challenges. We're rooted in coming together across the city, neighborhoods, dominant cultural organizations, and culturally specific groups to identify needs and solutions. And through our coalition and grant cohort model, PUA can reach further into the community and practice developing new and relevant infrastructure for solutions and community engagement. And last, the goal of fulfilling and empowered Portlanders. Through our capacity building work, PUA is supporting people, leveraging funds, and setting up systems that are connected to local government, but also separate and situated within the community. PUA is a concrete example of how these broad and very visionary goals can look like in practice. And the small amount of pilot money, which was granted at $40,000, but which we actually spent $35,000 of, was yielded all the outcomes that you're going to hear about through the presentation today. So with that, I will hand it over to Alice.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. My name is Alice Perry. I'm the Director of Community-Based Programs for Latino Network and a co-chair of PUA, the PUA Coalition. So it's my pleasure today to talk to you a little bit about the history of PUA, how it started. As you know, in November of 2016, immediately after the election, our community, as many communities, were stunned and immediately started to see the impacts of that election. Like so many other community-serving agencies, we moved quickly to respond to the community's fear about what this meant for them. The hate rhetoric leading up to the election gave us a glimpse of what we would be facing. But in those few weeks, we were on the ground responding by holding community forums across the Portland metro area. And we kept hearing about how children were being bullied in school, how workers were being harassed in their jobs, how people had racial slurs flung to them when they were buying their groceries or when they were driving down the street or getting gas. Our staff themselves were impacted by this vitriol, and we were responding to our community while holding our own grief, not only doing the day-to-day routine of providing the range of our services, but responding to these growing crises in our community. Representatives from both the Portland Police Bureau and the Gresham Police Bureau and the Sheriff's Department joined us in our forums to allay our community's fears, but they also reported that they weren't receiving increased reports about hate crimes or bias. As part of the ONI's Diversity and Civic Leadership Program, we were also hearing from the other partners that they were facing similar challenges, but challenges that were different and unique to ours at Latino Network. Hate shape-shifted across communities. So the DCL partners approached ONI to partner in responding to hate in our communities. We came to the city and ONI because of the history of our partnership with the city and their recognition of the importance of our communities. And we want to thank Commissioner Fritz for recognizing the importance of this work early on, her leadership in combating hate, and her support of the coalition. And we also want to thank Commissioner Udaley for continuing that support. We also came to the city as Carrie said, frankly, because it is the city's responsibility to ensure community safety. As community partners, we also recognize and accepted our shared co-responsibility, and we met often and regularly as the ONI Community Hate Response Coalition every week, sometimes several times a week. And the first part of each meeting, quite honestly, was simply to share about the multiple horrific incidents we were hearing about that were occurring in our city, and then moving on to what we need to do to be able to track them, and more importantly, to be able to respond to them. We asked the city, honestly, to partner with us by providing the additional resources we needed to respond effectively to our communities. Many of our community members, despite best efforts, did not feel safe to report hate crimes, incidents, speech and bullying to the police or to the schools or to their employers. Other community members and groups felt that this hate wasn't new. They voiced that this is what they had been grappling with for a long time. As this work grew, other community groups and individuals joined the growing effort, and we carefully shaped our coalition statement, named our coalition Portland United Against Hate, and chose a logo. The statement is grounded not only in response to the current expressions of hate in our community and what they're experiencing, whether they be incidents perpetrated by individuals or, frankly, state-sponsored hate, but also in the historic injustices and hatred that our community has long grappled with. The logo beautifully represents the city we envision, a city of love instead of hate. I would like to ask the PUA Coalition members to stand if they are able, or acknowledge that they are somehow a member of the coalition. Now, I would also ask any community member who has ever been impacted by hate to also stand if they are able, or to indicate in some way that they have so been impacted. As we look around, we see that this is an issue that impacts us all. From the beginning, from the beginning of our work, we have expressed three goals: document what is happening, meaningfully and appropriately respond to community members experiencing hate, and collectively work with the city to make Portland a safe and welcoming place for all. You'll be hearing next about the details about how we, the city and PUA members, in partnership, engage community members in focus groups, community members that often aren't asked about their opinions, in a dialogue about what a respectful and meaningful data collection and response system would look like, and how we as city and community members together can take the next steps to ensure that the work towards making Portland safe, and that the work we do will make Portland safe and welcoming for all. Hate in our community didn't begin in 2016, and however much the fan was flamed, and despite how painful it has been, we can take this opportunity to finish this work together and build a tool and response system that will enable community members.
Thank you.
Thanks. My words are blurring. That will enable community members to safely report hate, to access support, and also, if they desire, join us in working in partnership with others to build a more welcoming and hate-free Portland.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the strong message. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dear Honorable Mayor Wheeler and members of the Portland City Commission, 1 year ago this month, a white nationalist activist verbally attacked 2 young African-American women on the Max. When 3 courageous white men sought to de-escalate the situation, The white nationalists stabbed them, killing 2. This horrific event focused national attention on the crisis of hate violence in Oregon. Across the country, many were surprised at the level of violent racism, particularly in a city with a progressive reputation. But those committed to an inclusive Oregon know that racial exclusion and other forms of bigoted intimidation have deep roots in Oregon. And this was mostly merely a recent wave of white nationalist assaults on civic participation and civil rights. For nearly 30 years, I've worked with communities, government, and civil society to reduce the impact of hate violence. I began that work in Oregon in 1991 and continue that work, most recently as the U.S. Civil Rights Program Officer at the Ford Foundation, and now as the Executive Director of Western State Center. Last summer, when my home was facing a rising tide of white nationalism, I decided to return to Oregon to help. I've never forgotten that it was in Portland that government, business, and community leaders successfully out-organized white nationalists in the 1990s, and I believe Portland will do so again. We have a lot of work to do. Today, Oregon leads the nation in reported hate and bias crimes. ProPublica documented the highest reported rate per capita of incidences occur in Oregon. These include swastikas, attacks on Jewish households, and intimidation of immigrants. The FBI data reported that 104 hate crimes occurred in Oregon in 2016. When hate violence occurs, whether it's Nazi symbols on the courthouse, as happened in Eugene, Oregon, or anti-Muslim graffiti, or the murders last spring, it affects so many more people beyond the direct targets of victims. It impacts our entire community. A UK study from the University of Sussex found that knowing a victim of hate crime or even hearing about a hate crime can have significant negative impact. They found that many people respond with anger, anxiety, or feelings of vulnerability. This makes intuitive sense to most of us based on our personal experience. But what is most striking is that in this study, of the 3,000 Muslim and LGBT people interviewed, 4 out of 5 participants knew someone who had been a victim in the past 3 years. Hate crimes and intimidation are a direct assault on community inclusion. It directly undermines a city's reputation and faith in its democratic institutions. Over the past 2 years, white nationalists have surged into the political mainstream. It has gained energy, openly recruiting in our neighborhoods. But let's be clear, white nationalists don't seek to merely spread hate. They seek to organize that hate to undermine democratic institutions. We should be clear that when we have a growing social movement invested in ethnic cleansing, hate violence is the logical outcome. Hate violence is white nationalist ideology in practice. We know we have a problem with hate violence in Oregon, and odds are that it's bigger than we've imagined. The hate crime figures I cited previously are deeply unreliable. Even the Department of Justice acknowledges that most hate crimes are never reported. That's one reason why Portland United Against Hate is such an important initiative. It's important that we continue to explore best practices to reducing the impact of hate violence in our community. We can't address a problem as wide-reaching and significant as hate violence without real data-driven understanding of it. Portland United Against Hate not only tells us what's happening in our city, but provides a building block for creating solutions. Our communities can't solve the enormous problem of hate violence alone, and neither can our government. It is our city government's job to build safe, livable communities, and it is the community's job to care for each other. Portland United Against Hate is a model of how our community, government, and business can work together to meet these goals, paving the way to make Portland a safer, more inclusive, and more hopeful place to live. I appreciate each of you, and thank you for your strong leadership on this issue.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, all three of you.
All right, we have our next panel. Dr. Shweta Murthy, Dr. Justin Henderson, Suleiman Noor, and Simab Husseini. We're going to need one extra chair if someone can help with that. Welcome, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Shweta Murthy. I'm the Research Director at the Coalition of Communities of Color. I come to this work with a PhD in political science and over a decade in academic research. I want to talk to you today about the pilot project that we conducted last fall. The first goal of this pilot project was to really gather community insights and experiences around hate crimes and reporting procedures, and then to really use that to lay the foundation to advise in the creation of a community-driven hate documentation process, and to inform best practices about what kind of resources and guidance is needed around the hate crime and incident reporting process. Before I get into the details of this pilot project study, I want to talk to you about the principles that inform this pilot project. And these are the principles of research justice that basically center and emphasize communities as experts of our experiences, that we possess experiential and historical and cultural knowledge that needs to be taken seriously, that needs to be given the legitimacy of evidence in policy making, and that communities have the right to research, i.e. communities have the right to self-determine what knowledge is produced about them. They have the right to be heard, meaning that we have a right for our experiences to be not dismissed as anecdotal and to be taken seriously. And we have the right to know. We have the right to know research and data and policy that exists about us and that impacts our lives.
Oh, too close.
Sorry, it's been a while since I spoke to a microphone. So what that meant for the pilot project was that even before we started gathering communities together to talk about hate crimes and hate violence, we wanted to give space to communities to really define what it means to experience hate, to be able to share and discuss what kind of experiences with hate communities have had. So from a research point of view, we devised a community-based participatory method where we really focused on focus groups as the best way to really engage communities in that conversation, where we could give space to communities to really engage with and share what experiences with hate they've had, how they define hate, which may be different from how law defines hate crimes. And therefore, based on that, be able to share their best advice on what a hate incident documentation process would look like. So so this wasn't a comprehensive needs assessment of hate violence in communities, but rather an opportunity for communities to really fundamentally shift our understanding of hate violence and to be able to propose solutions for how that hate incident, that hate violence should be documented and shared. From a research point of view, we also know that communities can experience focus group fatigue. And so we didn't want to continuously and persistently engage communities in focus groups. So we decided on 7 focus groups with different partners that are listed on this slide here. We did it over fall 2017. And we were able to engage with a wide variety of community members who are at the front lines of experiencing hate violence. The focus group participants and community members were of different ages. They were of different race, ethnicity, and nationalities. They identified in different ways in terms of their gender, and they came from different types of housing status. And I'm happy to go into more details if you have any questions later. All right, so this is the first time, really, that communities most impacted by hate violence have been given the opportunity to present a systematic report about their experiences as well as their solutions. These findings can no longer be dismissed as one-off, as anecdotal, as emotional. It creates the foundation for future work. It creates accountability. So the 4 major findings from this pilot project were that hate goes beyond crime. Feels rather basic, but it needs to be said. For our communities, hate is a feeling, emotion, a behavior. It is interpersonal. It is systemic. It is hate speech. It's symbols. It's racial profiling. It's ICE raids, it's unequal access to opportunities and resources. Hate is internalized and can also come up within groups and within communities. The second major finding of this pilot project was, as Carrie mentioned earlier, that communities have had to make do with their own support networks. Those support networks are stretched to capacity and are not well resourced. And many were even unaware when resources were available of those resources or were unable to access them due to various barriers. The third major finding that came up from this pilot study was that communities are tired of reacting all the time. They feel that there can be proactive response, that hate can be prevented rather than merely being responded to, and that can happen through education, through learning, through bystander intervention, and so on. And lastly, and this is where I'll spend a little bit of time, is the finding that we need more appropriate approaches to encourage hate incident reporting. That hate crime tracking as it currently exists is not working for most communities. As Eric mentioned in his testimonial, there's already national level data that suggests that hate crimes are underreported. I'll add my own data to that. The National Crime Victimization Survey that collected information and data about victims of crimes between 2011 and 2015 said that 54% of hate crimes go unreported. This, when racial bias is the primary motivator of crime. So why does hate crime go unreported? Our pilot study found 4 barriers. One is just lack of attention. The pilot study found a breadth of hate violence and hate incidents. And it's happening everywhere, it's happening all the time, and attention just isn't paid to that breadth and depth of experience. The second is that a lot of times authorities that would collect hate crimes turn out to be perpetrators. law enforcement, teachers, employers, have all these experiences came up in the focus groups. It can create a feeling of insecurity and discomfort in reporting hate crimes. And it can also be unclear to community members where they can report hate crimes or their hate incidents to if the people that they're supposed to report them to are the ones who are perpetrating it. The third finding that came up as a barrier was lack of action, that when folks have reported incidents and violence of different forms, that either nothing has happened or there's been no support. What that means is that even the reporting process has further created harmful effects. It has re-traumatized community members who took the courage to report it to begin with. What that means is that community members in our focus groups identified 3 big elements that need to be included in the reporting process. One, that the reporting process should be person-centered, and it should be part of a healing process. Data for data's sake does not work. That message was very resoundingly clear from our pilot study. The reporting process should not be re-traumatizing and should not cause more harm, and it should walk alongside with action. That, again, data for data's sake does not work, and if somebody is coming in and reporting a deeply traumatic experience that happened to them, there needs to be action, there needs to be resources that follow along with it. So therein ends our report back of the pilot study. I would like to share a little bit about how this pilot study is forming the foundation of the work that we are currently doing. The CCC, the Coalition of Communities of Color, was commissioned to build a proof of concept that would be informed by the pilot project findings, and that's what we're currently engaged in. We are building on the pilot by creating a community-centered, community-driven, trauma-informed hate incident tracking tool, which is the beta platform that Carrie mentioned at the beginning. We are going to create opportunities for reporting through trusted interface community organizations, our fellow PUA partners. We have a resource guide element in our platform which connects people who report their experiences to resources that already exist. And in doing all 3, we are really taking a holistic approach, again, to hate incident documentation system, that data goes along with capacity building, training, prevention, and resource provision. The manner in which we plan to collect data through this proof of concept is through an online interface, through walk-ins with over 10 community-facing organizations who will be trained in trauma-informed data collection practices. And to the extent that our community organizations have the capacity, we'll also provide this platform in different languages and through different culturally specific data practices. Lastly, we're thinking ahead in terms of what data, what kind of experiences are going to come in, and we're in the process of creating agreements with our partners about who will own this data and how this data will be shared. Where we are at this moment is that community organizations will hold personalized data that they intake from different community members, and that PUA coalition on the whole will have access to aggregate data that is de-identified for the sake of advocacy, organizing, and targeted intervention.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Justin Henderson, and I'm the director of the Lewis and Clark Community Counseling Center. I'm also an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Counseling and Education. What I want to talk about today is a little bit about how to integrate trauma-informed care into this hate incident response system that we're attempting to develop. And part of this for me was to think that the work really bore out of the need for there to be a more consolidated process in which members of our community can aid those who have been targets of hate and bias. And for me, I really believe that the model that we're creating recognizes the need for training as well as data gathering capabilities amongst multiple domains. So I'm going to focus on two specific areas. One is going to be on what I'm calling trauma-informed hate incident tracking, and the other is going to be on trauma-informed hate response. And as an academic, obviously, I like long-winded titles. I think part of this is to understand that from a trauma-informed hate incident tracking framework, we have to be able to gather information while simultaneously being sensitive to individuals, families, and communities who have been targeted. And the pilot project data, or the outcomes of this from respondents show this. And so there really needs to be a balancing between data gathering and relationship building. It's vital that people feel heard, while also empowering them with knowledge necessary to make informed decisions about their situation. I also see that it's really important for us to apply a wide net within our community. This model suggests that there has to be multiple avenues, i.e. Community organizations, agencies, etc., by which people may access resources and search for help. There needs to also be the identification of supports, like the points of contact, identifying places and people that will be able to seek out help and support. And you have to train those particular people who will be receiving people who are seeking help in the ways of trauma-informed care, so that the accuracy of the data that you're gathering and the reporting is viable. One of the things that we know from research is that self-report data accuracy and viability is increased when it's conducted from a trauma-informed approach that takes into consideration cultural competency, emotional and relational resources, sources of post-traumatic resiliency, and ongoing relational support from data gatherers. The other piece to this that I've been focusing on as well is training up-and-coming mental health professionals and making sure that they are trained to screen, assess, and support those who have been targets of hate in the community. Part of this is because we have to recognize that the psychological consequences and the relational consequences of hate, as has already been discussed, can look many different ways, and the needs of those individuals and families and communities may be variable. And so I think that there's a broad applicability, in my opinion, of professionals other than mental health professionals that need to know how to apply and respond in a trauma-informed way to targets of hate. I think that there's also a systemic influence where properly trained mental health professionals may also serve as consultants to the community. So in closing, I think that's really important for us, at least, to be involved in the Portland United Against Hate organization. And I think for us, being able to have the opportunity to actually enact our social justice mission within community organizers who, quite frankly, I've been impressed with since the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Suleiman Noor. I'm a community engagement specialist from ICO, African Youth and Community Organization. I'm here to talk about the last piece of the pilot project. Beyond the data, there's community safety. It became clear through the pilot project that resourcing our community is a huge need. The PUA Coalition is addressing response and prevention in a variety of ways, including training, prevention, intervention, education, and community building. This work is just as critical as data tracking because we don't just want to know what is happening, but also we want to do something about it. I'm going to share African Youth and Community Organization's experience with the community building as a model for community safety. PUA project has increased trust between East African communities and institutions and mainstream community. Many of our constituency feared for their safety to encounter anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant sentiment or any violence motivated by intolerance. We are being targeted, our safety is at risk building our capacity to deal with hate has been a clear benefit for the population ICO works with. You will hear about how this is an issue for public safety from a Muslim woman during the testimony. The PUA project enabled us to establish a series of activity regarding hate and bias, including community engagement meeting, staff training, collaboration with other organizations. It also expanded our opportunity for youth. It gave us a chance to educate our community. That is the cultural capacity building, like community chai dialogue gathering, where the participants come together and share idea openly without fear. So this partnership will give us strength and help we need to fight against hate. It is engaging and ongoing activity that will bring a great result. I would like to conclude my speech sharing one of the community chai story. We had invited many of the mainstream community, which happened to be one of the EPAP grant committee board member. After listening our community story regarding hate and bias, she returned to the EPAP board and convinced them to increase our grant request from 4,000 to 9,500. Thank you, all of you, for considering giving attention to this great work that PUA is doing, and I appreciate your commitment for building inclusive and livable neighborhood and communities. I thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor Wheeler and the City Commission, thank you. My name is Simab Husseini, and I'm a community organizer with Unite Oregon. I'm here in that role and capacity. However, I'm also the co-founder and board member for the Council on American Islamic Relations Oregon chapter. It's not easy to point out one or a few things regarding the ripple effects of hate incidents over community without getting into the socioeconomics of a system that gave hate the permission it needed to get here. Before one even becomes a victim, it's almost common knowledge that these incidents are bound to happen at some point in their lives. Black parents have the talk, which non-black people of color are beginning to adopt. The effects of fractal systemic failures over an extended period of time for those described to be of a protected class has been long and fraught with challenges. The Council on American Islamic Relations recorded a 17% increase in anti-Muslim bias incidents nationwide in 2017 over 2016. This was accompanied by a 15% increase in hate crimes targeting American Muslims, including children, youth, and families over the same period. Its reach is ever expanding in the 21st century. But our work continues, and our reach depends on you today. So today we focus on hate incidents and the impacts of hate crimes on our marginalized communities, the epidemic of it, and how it is rooted in our city and even state. One of our approaches at Unite Oregon is through leadership development. Our work with Portland United Against Hate in the building of this tool allows us to not only rely on a safe, community-trusted reporting and tracking tool, it also allows our diverse immigrant community to lead it. That's both uplifting and empowering. The need to create and maintain tools that will allow us to track potential hate crimes will be evolutionary in this city and a model outside of it. Portland United Against Hate has come together as a coalition of specific community-based organizations that understand the need and importance to track this epidemic and the vested interest and will to rid of it. The importance of taking feedback and experiences from communities and modeling them into useful community engagement is immeasurably beneficial to this city and the real solution to fix these problems. With little resources, the pilot project has laid this foundation and will have critical outcomes for many communities represented by Portland United Against Hate's 70-plus member coalition and this city as a whole. In memory of the one-year anniversary to the MAX train stabbings and murders, and the 30-year anniversary coming up of the death of Mulugeta Shira, let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, all four of you.
All right, our final panel is Asli Hassan, Jimmy Dogo, Diane Hess, and Meg Juarez. Jimmy, you're looking very sharp today.
Thank you.
It's good to see you all. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start if nobody else is talking. All right. Again, Honorable Mayor Wheeler and also Honorable Commissioner, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jimmy Dogo. I am the Director of Africa House and also Associate Director of IRCO, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. The Portland United Against Hate is a partnership between the community and the city of Portland. We all know that. And given what we did through our pilot project and also through the community, for us, the city is getting a lot more into this partnership, like wraparound services that are culturally responsible for people affected by hate incident. It was also an opportunity for city to have access to our various immigrant and refugee community who are living here within city of Portland. It was also an opportunity for the community and the city of Portland to find solutions to problems that are affecting our community. And especially at the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, the community that we serve, coming from all over the world, from the Middle East, from Southeast Asia, from Africa, and from Eastern Europe. And most of those newly arrived refugees and immigrants are facing, hate crime and hate incident, and they don't know where to look to. And that's why at IRCO, we through this partnership, and again, thank you, we were able to put in place an advisory, which we call it community, action team, that comprise of representatives from all those communities and include also 2 Portland Police Bureau officers, community liaison, Officer Natasha and Officer Adi, who are in this advisory. This gives an opportunity for our community to have a focal point to call when there is a hate crime or hate incident. For example, when they punish the Muslim Day on April 3rd, on April 2nd, all our Muslim students stopped going to school. On April 3rd, different school districts keep calling us. 90% of our students didn't show up from Muslim students from Somalia, Middle East, Rohingyas, nobody showed us. But all those families did not call a school, but call us at IRCO to let us know that because of those flyers and all those flyers that are going viral, they're not letting their children go to school because of this, punish the Muslim Day. So those kind of advisory that are put in place for the community to call a place that they're comfortable to call and report those hate incidents. Again, thank you so much for the help. Thank you for this help to allow us to educate our community about resources that are available to respond to hate, and also to create a network to build community capacity to respond and reduce the impact of the bias incidents and crime. Again, this partnership allows us to strengthen our community network and capacity, reach out to different schools, neighborhood, faith group, affinity group, ethnic store, and ethnic restaurant to educate them about what is hate and hate crime and where to call in case there is an incident that they need to report. It helps us also, conduct regular training on hate and hate incident to our community, and also provide a safe place for reporting and consultation, as well as, meeting with law enforcement if need be that we need to contact, or go for a legal procedure. So again, this opportunity and strengthen our capacity to educate our community, prevent and respond, and also support the victim, and to tell them that they're not alone. The whole city of Portland are behind them to support them through this project. So thank you, and we will do more if we can expand this partnership, because there are still more things that need to be done if this project can continue or could be spent. Again, thank you for the support.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
My name is Asli Abdullahi Hassan. I greet all elected officials, community-based organization members, and community members. I would like to share with you. I would like to share with you some of the experience I have gone through under those from Somali community and others from refugee community. Those experiences I've personally gone through, my kids have gone through, and my neighbors have gone through this experience. The biggest problems happens on the public transportation, in the schools, and at workplaces. For example, like yesterday in the afternoon, I was going to the library to learn ESL so that I can pass my immigration test. There's this gentleman who drove his car towards me and then almost hit me, and then that made me fear for my life and went back home. I missed that class yesterday. My young daughter, who is about 10 years old, was in school and her headscarf was removed by another student. We expressed our frustrations. Nothing was done. And that's very disappointing. There were also two female students who are people with disabilities. They were out with their teachers in the community, and as they were trying to cross the light, one was deaf, the other one was physical disability. So this person came behind them and started beating them. Only the two who were dressed like Muslims. The problem is so huge, we cannot just sum up here. Thank you for the good work you are doing. We want more of these meetings to happen. We want to have an opportunity to express our views so that at least you hear what the problem is all about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Diane Hessen. I'm the Education and Outreach Director at the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and our organization has been fighting illegal housing discrimination since 1991. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, over a third of hateful acts occur in housing. Feeling safe and secure in our homes is, of course, fundamental. People who are feeling trapped by hateful acts where they live feel even more vulnerable amid a housing crisis where there are limited opportunities to move. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, harassment, threats, intimidation, coercion in housing are illegal. Our hotline provides assistance and advocacy to victims, and through our Portland United Against Hate partnerships, we are deepening relationships of trust with different cultural communities and increasing collaboration. We're working with our partners in conducting Know Your Rights trainings, targeting organizations working with impacted communities. This has led to an increase in calls on related to hateful acts on our hotline and requests for more trainings and technical assistance. We are also training housing providers, landlords, homeowner associations, and homeless shelters on their legal responsibilities to prevent and address acts of hate that occur on their properties. In 2016, HUD issued a ruling requiring these housing providers to address these situations, and not doing so is a violation of federal law. One recent example of a situation we dealt with was in an apartment complex where there were racist terms that had been sprayed in the parking lot close to the unit of an African-American tenant. Initially, the manager did nothing, but after we contacted them and worked with them, they immediately cleaned up the language, sent a letter to all tenants explaining racial harassment would not be tolerated, and put up cameras throughout the parking lot. And we had been following up with the victim, and no, there have not been further problems. The impact we've had here is we've had requests for housing providers for more trainings and technical assistance on how to address and prevent hateful acts. We developed a sample policy on resident harassment that many providers are utilizing, and we are getting requests from a range of different providers to feature our trainings at their annual conferences. So we are getting increased contact, increased activity in this area. So I'm confident we are starting to make an impact as part of PUA. We are very grateful to be a point of contact and a partner with Portland United Against Hate, and want to thank you all for your support.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Meg Juarez. I am the Crime Prevention Coordinator for the Crime Prevention Program at ONI. Our work in crime prevention focuses on providing public safety and education and awareness and supporting community partnerships to address public safety issues, livability, and resiliency. As we pivot our work to a more holistic model that involves new partnerships, more inclusive outreach, and a broader scope of public safety and resiliency, we also want to integrate awareness and prevention of hate crimes and incidents in our work. Portland United Against Hate can help support us in doing that. Having different programs within the city and bureau weave together their expertise makes us a stronger, more responsive, and more inclusive local government. I'm here today because I think that the work of PUA will benefit and support the work of crime prevention in building capacity for resilient communities. Crime prevention coordinators work with communities, helping them address public safety issues and concerns already. Currently, however, they do not necessarily have the capacity or a method for dealing with hate incidents. So PUA's future hate incident tracking tool could be a valuable asset to the crime prevention team and to the communities that we work with. PUA is a preparedness and community safety resource for our team. We have discussed coordinating trainings and educational sessions to better equip the crime prevention team with tools to use in their day-to-day work. PUA not only meets ONI goals, as you heard PUA staff speak to earlier, but this project could augment the work of crime prevention and the crime prevention team what they're already doing to help build safe and livable Portland communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your good work. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Judy.
Well, that concludes our presentation. Colleagues, and questions or comments?
And we'll also entertain a motion.
I move the report.
Second.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Daly. Please call the roll.
Fish.
So I want to begin by thanking my two colleagues for their leadership in bringing this, this concept to this point. And I want to thank community members for their testimony today. Frankly, it's very sobering listening to the testimony and reviewing the report. And there is a big gulf between the way we often view ourselves as a progressive community and the reality of how people are treated. So we clearly have a lot of work to do. My understanding is that recently the grants were made, so the next report we'll have is on the fruits of that work, hearing from our community partners on the various programs they put in place to do reporting and various other things. So I look forward to that, and I assume, Commissioner Daly, this will now become an annual report that we will receive. So I look forward to. I'm very proud of the community partners that are acknowledged in the report that the city's working with. These are trusted organizations in the front line of doing great work, and we're very proud to have them as partners and thank them for their work. On that, I'm happy to accept the report. Aye.
Daly?
Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here. I'm so impressed with the depth and scope of your collective efforts. Not only will you be delivering much-needed services and supports to our most affected communities, you're going to help all of us be better prepared to respond to hate. From interrupting hate trainings to collecting and tracking data that will inform our ongoing efforts as a council and as a city striving to be an inclusive and safe place for all. Vulnerable communities don't need more platitudes from us. They need remedies, they need resources, and they need real support. And okay, I'll pause for some snapping, thank you. And I'm commend all of your efforts and also thank my colleagues for supporting this venture. I also want to especially thank the mayor for supporting my request for funding for universal defense, because while Portlanders United Against Hate is standing up to hate in our local community, we also need to stand up to the civil rights violations being committed by our own government. So thank you, Mayor Wheeler. I mentioned earlier, and I just want to say it for the sake of anyone that wasn't in the reception earlier and for my colleagues, I came earlier today, I attended Senator Merkley's Bending Towards Justice Awards ceremony, and he quoted Dr. Martin Luther King, his famous quote about the arc of the moral universe bending towards justice. And again, I just want to say that only happens with the hard work of our community. So thank you and congratulations, and I'm really looking forward to the coming work that we're all going to be doing. Aye.
Fritz.
It's very impressive what the community is doing, and it's important to recognize for those watching at home, this is community-driven, community-led, and people helping each other, which is what we should be doing in Portland. I want to particularly recognize the community-based organizations who participated in the focus groups. IRCA, Immigrant Refugee Community Organization Africa House, the Q Center, Resolutions Northwest, Unite Oregon, the Urban League of Portland, Asian Family Center, IRCO itself, Latino Network, and the Northwest Cart and Captioning, all of whom participated and gave valuable feedback. So the next step is to develop those reporting mechanisms to take it to, then what do we do about that? And that's going to then require more intense partnership, not only within ONI, the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, but throughout the city government and throughout our community. So thank you to Som Subedi in the Portland Parks and Recreation, who's been a partner in encouraging this work and in highlighting the value of immigrants and refugees in our community, which then hopefully will get more people aware of why it's important that everybody feels welcome and encouraged. I'm mindful that the woman whose daughter was attacked in the school, but by having her hijab removed, is, I don't think, here anymore. And so we have to recognize that we need to provide translation services more widespread. There's a lot of things that the city needs to do to make our processes more accessible, understandable, available to everybody. I'm glad to see the American Sign Language being present here today. So, you know, it's a lot of little things and there's a lot of big things that add up to this is what we can do together. I do remember back in 2016 and the first meetings that we had to just recognize we're not going to just let this happen. We're going to figure things out. And it does take time to figure things out because we haven't done it properly here in this country, this state, this city for the longest time. And so we have to, the white community has to in some ways unlearn our behaviors. Those of us who are immigrants who came here with a white skin and speaking English have so many advantages that I'm aware of. And yet still it's a challenging time still in our country. And with each day of going, doing our best here in City Hall and then going back to my home and watching what's been happening nationwide, worldwide, now more than ever, I think it's up to us as a community to fix what we can in our community. We can't, I feel powerless in many ways. Count on Senator Merkley to do the job for us as he has been doing. But what I do have the power to do is to change things here, one person at a time, one community at a time, one city at a time. And you have my continued commitment to keep working with you on that. Thank you for this report. Aye.
Wheeler?
So as per usual, I always sort of regret that as mayor I have to take my vote last, which means I have to speak after my colleagues who I have always found to be universally better at putting these things to words and more eloquent than I am. And so I'll do my level best to rise to the occasion. I actually think we are leading. And while I also appreciate Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden and our congressional delegation and their tremendous leadership efforts at the federal level, the fact of the matter is Washington's not leading this conversation. In many regards, it's the problem. And communities around the nation like ours are actually stepping up and filling that leadership void. And Commissioner Fritz, or maybe it was Commissioner Udaley, and I apologize, I don't remember, I believe it was Commissioner Udaley said people don't need to hear platitudes.
That was me.
That was Commissioner Udaley. And I'm sorry, I didn't remember that right off the bat. But it made me think, we can't afford to provide platitudes on any issue, much less on this issue, which is of significance. Everything is at stake right now. I mean, the future of our country, our ability to work together as communities, our ability to leverage the diversity which is growing in our communities, this is all at stake right now. And how we get through this time in our society will really define which path we are on beyond this time. And I'm actually, you know, there are days, I'm just going to confess, there are days when I wake up and I go, oh great, I'm the mayor of Portland, fabulous. This isn't one of those days. This is one of those days where I say, I am so proud and frankly humbled and honored that I get to be your mayor because you as a community are organizing like this to lead not only locally, but to serve as an example to other communities all around the country that we have our best days ahead as a city, as a state, as a country. And it's because of you. And I look at all the diversity in the room and the different backgrounds and experiences and organizations and skill sets. I mean, my gosh, this is a smart room. There are more doctors in here than when we invite the medical professionals in. Thank you for your leadership. This was probably one of the easiest decisions I think we've made as a council, and I appreciate my colleagues having brought this forward, and I'm super impressed with how we have leveraged very, very limited resources into something. I mean, you just took the limited resources we gave you and you ran with it and you leveraged the heck out of it, and you're providing something that I think is foundational, and we get to build on it in the future. And Commissioner Udaley mentioned that the efforts she's working on around universal representation. It's just one example. There's a lot of other directions we could go here. So thanks. I've said enough. I'm super proud of my colleagues. I'm super proud of you, and I look forward to continuing this partnership for a long time to come. I vote aye. The report's accepted. Thanks for everybody who's here. Let's see, time certain. Next item, please, 429.
Accept the state of housing.
I'm sorry, Carla. I'm sorry. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Thanks. We're in recess. Good idea. I'm going to get your... All right, we are back in session. Carla, could you please read the next item?
Item 429, accept the State of Housing in Portland 2017 report.
Colleagues, I have about 4.5 minutes of comments here. After 4 consecutive years of seeing rent increases of 5% or more, Portland saw a smaller overall rent increase in 2017 of 2%. While rents for larger units continued to rise, 5% for 2 bedrooms and 10% for 3 bedrooms, on average, relatively smaller increases in 1-bedroom units and a decline in studio rents helped limit Portland's overall rent growth compared to previous years. The average rental unit now charges $1,398 per month. You know what? I don't need, you're going to give this in your report. I don't need to go through all of this. If you miss any of it, I'll come back to it. Great. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. This is the Housing Bureau's 3rd year producing the State of Housing report. This report was initially developed to provide policymakers with an authoritative source on the housing market and affordability. It gives us a foundation for our policy and program designs and guides our investments, ensuring they're grounded in data about where the greatest need is. To that end, perhaps its most important contribution is to our understanding of affordability that goes beyond just an overview as the city as a whole and drills down into how opportunity and housing opportunity varies for families, seniors, communities of color, renters, homeowners, and low-income households. I'd like to, at the outset, acknowledge that this report is being presented a few months later than we would normally be presenting the report. We were hoping to incorporate data that we expected from the American Housing Survey from the Department of Commerce, which we expected in December. That data has still not yet been released, but it would have provided us with a more detailed picture on unit characteristics of things of the type of safety, quality, as well as more detailed demographics on who's in the units, accessibility, gender, and migration patterns. We're still anxiously awaiting that data, but we hope to incorporate it in the follow-up this year's State of Housing report, which you shall see in fall.
Very good, thank you.
The last thing I wanted to note before I turn it over to Matthew to start with some of the overview of the report is that, as you mentioned, Mayor, when you started, that rent growth may be starting to level off, but that picture is really very different for if you're a renter or a homeowner, whether you're a white household or a household of color, and where you live in the city. So with that, we'll turn it straight over to the data and information. Matthew?
Thank you.
Matthew Schaubel with the Housing Bureau for the record. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about rents and renters in Portland. And just as a reminder to folks watching and folks in the room, the city has about 264,000 households, and overall the home ownership rate is about 52%. I do think it's important to note that communities of color in Portland rent at disproportionately high rates, significantly higher rates for the African American, Native American, and even the Latino community. If you were to look at API disaggregated, the margin of error is a bit high for us to present it authoritarianly, but particularly Southeast Asian and South Asian also struggle with these sorts of disproportionately high renter rates. And you'll kind of see that this backdrop of who renters are in Portland and who owners are, you'll see a trend throughout the report that's it's really startling for the city of Portland. So looking at our affordability maps, the average Portland household can afford to live in most neighborhoods in the city, with the exception of neighborhoods in the central city and some of the surrounding neighborhoods. But Southwest Portland, Inner East Portland, and Outer East Portland, the average Portland household can afford to rent. But for households of color, on average, they are not able to afford to rent in the city of Portland due to disproportionately low incomes. If you look at rents over about a 10, 11-year period of time, the average rent in the city has gone up by 70% from 2005 to 2016, which is significant, and it's significantly, as we all know, impacting people's ability to afford to stay in the city. The Housing Bureau looks closely at rent burden, and we look at really two measures. Rent-burdened households are households who are paying more than 30% of their income on rent, and extremely rent-burdened households are paying more than 50% of their income on rent. And when you look at that data based on race and ethnicity, again, we see that for our communities of color, that over the past, from 2007 to 2016, they are paying an increasing percentage of their income on rent. And for African American households and Native American households, on average, they are extremely rent burdened. And Latino households are rent burdened and moving toward extremely rent burdened. When you're looking exclusively at new construction, so the new units coming online that have an average rent of between $1,900 and $2,000 per month asking rent, we see an even starker picture for our communities in Portland, where the percent of the total pre-tax income needed to meet those rents is dramatically higher, again, for communities of color than it is for the average white household. When you look at just looking at it overall for cost burden renters, about 3 in 5 households in the city are below 80% of the area median income. And that's somewhere around $55,000, $60,000 depending on your household size. Half of renters are not cost burdened. 22% of renters are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income on rent, and 27% are extremely cost burdened. I think a data point on here that I do want to mention is that within the non-cost burdened renters, an important figure is around 7,700 households are actually at 30% AMI and below. And this is the result of both home forwards, housing vouchers, both housing choice vouchers and project-based vouchers, as well as the affordable housing system, with the Housing Bureau financing affordable housing and nonprofits delivering it to the community.
What was that stat you just said?
So
just the numbers?
7,700 of the non-cost burden renters do earn less than 30% AMI.
Could you give that in a percentage? Because I don't.
Oh, sure. So in total, there are, in these figures, there's about 20,000, 20,000, and...
So about a third.
Yeah, about a third.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I will turn it over to Shannon for talking about homeowners in Portland.
Thank you, Matthew. So to review, this first slide here, we wanted to remind you that we have about 135,000 homeowners in the city. This represents approximately 52% of all households. It is a disproportionately white homeowners. And affordability on this slide, as you can see, for the average Portland household is $55,000 a year, and affordability for the average household of color is almost non-existent. Again, just to compare to what we see with renters. Homeowners in Portland, home prices have risen depending on the neighborhood from 22 to 50% over 5 years, or a 34% cost increase average. The highest increases over the last 5 years in homeownership costs, not the dollar amount, but the percent, have actually been in the Lentz Foster neighborhood, followed by 122nd and Division. 122nd and Division, however, still remains affordable for many homeowners. Thank you, Matt. Which is what this next slide shows, is that they are actually the most affordable neighborhood for buying a home, and yet have risen dramatically over the last 5 years. As in terms of home ownership affordability, this delineates what different households can afford in terms of a mortgage. Black households can afford approximately $120,000 in a mortgage, which can show you why affordability is out of reach in the city of Portland for most Black households. This varies by race, with Native American and American Indian and Alaskan Native at $125,000 in affordability, and Latino around $200,000 in affordability. This is why we focus most of our homeownership programs exclusively through culturally specific organizations. This slide can be somewhat confusing, but our intent with this was to contrast what the average homeowner in Portland has experienced in the same time period that renters have seen a 70% increase. Homeowners, taking into account all factors that go into homeownership in terms of insurance, mortgage payments, if they have any, as well as taxes, have seen a 25% increase. This really demonstrates how homeownership can encourage stability and wealth generation.
So looking at the permitting and production numbers, again, in 2016 and even in 2017, which will be incorporated in the next report, the 20-year highs that the city's been seeing in multifamily permitting production have maintained. Again, sitting roughly around 4,000 units in the multifamily space. And actually in 2017, as a preview of the upcoming report, there are about 6,000 units that were permitted and about 6,600 units that came into production. On the single family side, we're still seeing permitting and production below pre-recessionary levels. For looking forward to the next report for the 2017 data, the numbers indicate a lower level of permitting and production than in 2016. I think it'll be interesting, and we've been in conversations with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and as some of the residential infill work moves forward, if it moves forward, see what the impact of that is on increasing the single-family stock in the city. Looking at that by neighborhood, again, we see the concentration of multifamily permitting in the central city and the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as North and Northeast Portland. And single family continues to be concentrated in Northeast Portland and inner Southeast Portland.
So, and finally, we're going to present you with some information on the Housing Bureau programs and our performance. So this slide may look familiar to you. It delineates both where our units are in production and the units that we currently have in our regulated portfolio. Last year, we brought online 511 new units and preserved 145 units of affordable housing. We are also proud that we were able to increase our deeply affordable units in our production pipeline by 12%. I would like to acknowledge that in this year's report, we have a placeholder for our progress on permanent supportive housing as we're working to develop the program and policy guidelines, but I actually wanted to give you a real-time snapshot of what we've been able to accomplish, and quite frankly, just since this report was published in February. And so we have been able to plan and or produce 192 units of permanent supportive housing, which would represent a 24% increase last year. This is dependent upon all of the projects we currently have under contract with the bond moving forward. But with our partnership with Home Forward, we've been aggressively able to plan to be able to bring on permanent supportive housing and provide dedicated units to meet council's policy goals they set for us last year. And then just to give you an overview of what we have in our pipeline, our portfolio, we currently have 800 units. We added 20 units of supportive housing through the Ellington last year, as well as 6 in Oliver Station through a commitment by the developer, which that building is located in the Lentz neighborhood. And then this lists out the units that we have in the planning and production phase pipeline.
Remind me, the city policy is an additional 2,000 units or 2,000 total?
The policy was an additional 2,000 units of permanent supportive housing. The policy and was built on a share of those units being in new developments and a share of those units actually coming online and market developments are actually moving folks into the private rental market. But we're still working out the final details on that and plan to have that report to you in summer. But I did want to give you a little update about what we've been working on.
That's interesting. Thank you.
As you know, inclusionary housing is a new program for the Bureau. It launched last year. In just over a year, there are 30 inclusionary housing projects in process with over 180 units of affordable housing in those projects in the pipeline. We have 1,660 total units in 30 projects currently. And in pre-application and early assistance meetings, there are 49 additional projects, including 9 in the central city, which would bring on a minimum of 1,200 new units to the city. This gives you a little snapshot both of our progress last year in terms of programs for homeownership and a little bit of information on where we are halfway through this fiscal year. So last year we were able to help 993 homeowners with services to move them into homeownership. This includes things like counseling and education services, of which our partners have provided to 663 Portlanders, and we have already provided 16 down payment assistance loans in the first half of this fiscal year for homeownership. We also prioritize stabilizing homeowners where they are. Last year, we were able to provide services to over 942 Portlanders. This year, we have, in the first half of our reporting, provided home repair loans to 14 families, home repair grants to 269 families, and helped foreclosure prevention services to 158 families. I'd also like to note in the mayor's proposed budget this year, he has proposed to add what would be our first citywide source of home repair grants, focused primarily on East Portland. And then finally, a little bit of information about the newly established Renter Services Office. Last year, 2,100 Portlanders were provided with education and legal services. And this year, in the first 2 quarters, we are on target to meet our annual goals. Finally, just a little bit of a snapshot of the Joint Office. We do report for them in conjunction with their State of Housing report, but this gives you information on, it's probably too small for most people to see, but on the placements, preventions, and shelter access, and notes our partnership, again, to work on the policy that you established for 2,000 additional permanent supportive housing units in the next 10 years. So with that, we would open it to your questions.
All right, I'll give you a general question to start us off. So the housing bond, 5 to 7 year time frame is stated in the materials. We have actually delivered or have committed at this point approximately half of those units.
Yes.
The affordable housing that you are delivering is at a record high and continues to be projected to be at that level into the foreseeable future. You are adding new programs. You are on track, at least for this year, and it looks like for next year, to meet our objectives around permanent supportive housing. So by objective standards, things are going great. What's keeping you up at night?
North and Northeast Oversight Committee's work and the report that you just saw last month, and how to bring that back on track and keep the promises that we've made to the community, specifically as it relates to North and Northeast Portland, and bringing on the added layer of trying to do our level best to make up for the actions of the city in the past and bring on new policies and really deliver on those commitments in a way that's meaningful.
So how's that going?
We're going to do it. So it's going to be a little tough, and it's going to be a little messy, but we're going to get people into the housing that we've promised them, and we're going to do it.
My work is done here. Colleagues, questions?
I'll jump in. First of all, what an amazingly comprehensive and detailed report. I guess my only complaint is I'd like you to boost the font next time, just because I think it's getting so dense that we're now...
Yeah, it seems fuzzy, too. Is it on your screen?
Well, it's because some pages are shrunk, and then they are highlighted, and then they're full page. But even if it means a slightly bigger page, I would say let's pump up the font a little bit. Three questions. First, you gave us a preview on the pipeline on permanent supportive housing units. Is it your intention in the next report to actually have a pie chart or something that allows us to visually track our progress against the goal?
Yes. And yes.
Thank you on that. Second, I want to pick up from something you mentioned in passing about the percentage of our regulated units that are deeply affordable. And in this instance, I'm going to talk about 30% of AMI or lower.
Okay.
At page 117 of the report, and these are, let's be clear, these are people who are in deep poverty, and they also are a population that is also served by Home Forward.
Yes.
So on page 117, if I do the math correctly, about 16% of our city-regulated units are for people at 30% or below of AMI. And the reason I know that's the right number is that that's the number you put in the text at page 119. So the calculator on my phone is working, maybe the only thing working on my phone.
Thank you.
Here's the concern I have, though. If you could turn to page 123, and let's look at the rental unit production snapshot. If we look at the units at 30% AMI and divide it by the total affordable, we're now down to 6%. So why the gap?
Oh, Commissioner, I think that if you're looking at the percentage, you're also looking at things that are not supported by us necessarily, but are market and include 80% AMI. So you're also seeing projects in this list.
So this is both private and regulated?
Yes, so I think you're probably looking at
It says at the top, city-regulated rental unit production pipeline.
This is the prior multi program that you're seeing embedded in here.
So I think if you're looking at the totals, there's two columns. There's one that's total units, because a lot of our buildings are mixed income.
Okay.
And that's the 4,783 unit number.
Okay.
And as far as total affordable.
Okay, so it's closer to 10%.
It's closer to 10%.
So what?
If I could just jump in for a second, for the fall report, if you redo this, could you maybe add a sentence or two explaining what the headline means? Because I agree it's a little confusing.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Okay, so it's better. So why the variance from 16% total portfolio, now we're at 10% of what's in the pipeline?
You know, I think what I would contrast that with is that what is not included in here is a lot of what's on the PSH slide, which is, I'll go back real quick, which are a lot of decisions that have been made since this production pipeline snapshot was created.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the 192 PSH units, and the vast majority are 30% AMI, as well as generally our 30% goals with the majority of our new production, which is buildings and units from the Portland Housing Bond. I don't have the exact percentage, I can get it to you, but you'll find that it's probably above that 16%. And so if you factor in the production pipeline historically and then balance that with the decisions that are being made with regard to the bond, it's probably pretty close to the 16%, if not above it.
Good, and I don't even know whether 16% is the right number, but that's the percentage of the total portfolio, and you know, we hear from people all the time that we should be investing in housing that serves a range of incomes and a range of neighborhoods and the like, and I certainly agree with the sentiment, but when you have limited resources and you know that one particular type of housing is urgently needed to address homelessness, we have to make sure that we continue to invest. And I'm heartened that by setting the 2,000 unit goal under PSH, what we're going to see over time is a growth above 16% of the number of our regulated units that serve people who are very poor.
As well as the large number of units for 30% in the bond, the goals in the bond.
Great. And the other question I had actually comes from the forward that the mayor has put in the document. Probably the only document here that you didn't scrub, so we'll blame the mayor if there's any inaccuracies in it. But I guess I didn't understand something in the forward, so I want to ask you.
Okay.
in the mayor's forward, it says, it refers to 20,000 housing units across the metro area are regulated affordable by a public entity. Then the majority of those are funded by the city of Portland. Does that exclude units that have a Section 8, that someone has obtained using a Section 8 voucher administered by Home Forward?
It excludes choice vouchers.
So it excludes, because that's the thing that jumped out at me, that the largest housing program in Oregon is the Section 8 voucher program.
Right.
Yes.
So the only way I think we could get to that number is to exclude the Section 8 program.
That's correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mayor?
And
Commissioner Daly.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just if I may, one of the reasons we calculate that in that way is because vouchers can move with individuals. And so we know we have 20,000 affordable units, regardless of where people move, where somebody with a voucher may move out of the city.
If I could just close the loop on it. Let me also close by saying that someone on my staff read this document word for word and identified 23 different references to permanent supportive housing in this document. So I want to tip my hat to you. It's in the definitions. There's a separate little chart explaining a policy update. The language is embedded, and I think that's entirely consistent with the guidance that this council gave you, which is we want to aggressively move into boosting our supply of permanent supportive housing as perhaps the most effective and certainly cost-effective tool to address homelessness. So thank you for that.
Who is that?
Jay Dunphy.
Awesome.
23.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm heartened to see that we helped nearly 1,000 people stay in homes that they owned. I think that helping low-income and/or distressed homeowners is another vital piece of our overall strategy. And I'm wondering if the Housing Bureau has any policy proposals in the work to assist in rent affordability.
So in terms of rent assistance programs or something of those types?
Sure. I mean, we're investing in keeping homeowners in their homes. How are we investing in keeping renters in their existing rentals?
Well, I do know that in conjunction with the Joint Office, that there is a long-term voucher pilot that is particularly focused on seniors, and I think it's working quite well. And I believe that the hope would be to expand that program. I don't think there's an expansion on the table presently, but quite frankly, that's probably the best way to stabilize renters is through a long-term voucher program. Most of our other forms of assistance have been short-term.
Emergency assistance.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that does not help them with affordability. I also think that some of the programs that we have talked about, and unfortunately our rental rehab program did not work in the last 2 years, but we're hoping this year to rethink that and provide a potential better option for you to consider in next year's budget. And I'm not sure exactly what that will look like, but we are contemplating an ability to help stabilize renters in the private market.
Great. And Matt, I have to go back to that one stat again because I don't think I quite caught what you were saying. So how many renter households do we have?
We have about 127,000 renter households.
And about 49% of them are cost burdened to some degree.
Correct.
So, sorry, I'm going to do the 127? Is that what you said?
Roughly 127,000.
Okay. So 51% of them are not cost burdened. So that's 64,770. Walk me through again that stat that you offered that said a certain portion of those who are not cost burdened are only are extremely low income and they're not cost burdened because they have stable affordable housing.
Yes, so I think I've left off a piece of that.
Yeah.
So for the non-cost burden, there are 7,730 households earning below 30% AMI, which my 1/3 comment was for all households below 80% AMI. I was not factoring in the households earning above 80% AMI into the number.
Okay,
So
all
there are a
right.
number of households above 80% AMI that are not cost burden. But just looking at those below 80% AMI, it's about 7,700 of about 20,000.
And we're looking at 80% because rents are affordable to people over 80%? Why are we making that
I mean,
delineation?
once you get, in Portland, once you get above 80, 90% AMI, yeah, generally there's more affordability in the city, but also that just happens to be our mandate. The Housing Bureau's mandate for programming is, for rental housing is below 80% AMI. And primarily 60% when you talk about our direct financing programs.
I'm gonna go back to my office and run some numbers to see what rents would be if they had held roughly equivalent to home owner expenses, you know, just out of curiosity, because that's a pretty significant chasm, 45% higher increase than homeownership.
Can I ask two other questions?
Commissioner.
Have we essentially abandoned no net loss as a policy? Because we used to track that years ago, but has that essentially, is that either dormant or has it been repealed in the central city?
So we continue to track that. I'm just checking for the page number. It is in our, and it's in our part 4, which is our policy target section. And there's a number of them between all of the Portland plan, the different aspects of the comprehensive plan 2035 and the urban renewal plans. So I think we've incorporated it in. The challenge with the no net loss is we're actually fairly close to meeting the policy target, but when it was set, there was a substantial portion of the units that were market affordable, and we're simply making it up with financed, regulated affordable. So we're tracking it. Page 100.
100, yeah.
Yeah. But it's really, we are, as a city, having to make up for the loss of market affordable units in the central city. So it's something we closely track. It's something that we certainly are making investments in the central city, but to accomplish that, it will fall squarely on the shoulders of government and nonprofit partners.
Okay, thank you. And second, I've heard a range of numbers from people about the number of deeply affordable units in our community that were short, and the range is 24, 25, 26, 27,000. Do you have a number in the report that you quantify? And if not, do you have a view on that subject?
So, yeah, looking at slide 9 in the presentation, there's a reason that we are presenting this as percentages, and it's because the data that is used to calculate cost burden is slightly old. It's data provided from HUD, and the latest data is from, it's a 5-year data set with 2014. And so applying real numbers most likely underestimates the need, but I can share the real numbers. I just wanted to preface it with that. So for, bear with me on the numbers. For the 22% for cost burden households, 2,200 of those households are below 30% AMI. 7,900 households are between 30% and 50% of the area median income, and 11,000 are between 50% AMI and 80% AMI. So in total, the number of cost burden renters below 80% AMI is about 21,000 households. For extremely cost burdened, there are 19,700 extremely cost burden renters at 30% AMI and below. There are 8,900 roughly renters that are extremely cost burdened between 30 and 50% AMI. And then 2,500 between 50 and 80% AMI, which is, that's where you get here your 29,000 figure, is it's the extremely cost burden, which is roughly 29,000 renters in Portland.
So technically, we're talking about people that are already renting but are extremely cost burdened.
Correct.
So when we talk about a number of 29,000 units or something like that, another way of looking at it is if we had a robust local voucher program, we could move someone from very cost burdened to cost burdened, or cost burdened to where the HUD guidelines are.
Correct.
Without adding new units.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
I really appreciate all the data in here and the way it's laid out. I think, Commissioner Daly, when we're looking at how much home ownership prices have gone up, the part that I really appreciate being in here is about median income and comparing it between 2000 and 2015 and the poverty rate. And I'm just looking at my neighborhood, West Portland, on page 90, and then comparing it with Woodstock on 91. And median income has actually gone down since in the last 15 years. And the poverty rate has gone up from 6.6 to 9.4. And it's the same in Woodstock, that while the median income's gone down, and the poverty rate in Woodstock is now 15.5. So, we talk about affordable housing. The challenge is that income has not only not kept pace, income has actually gone down. So,
I think you'll also find that home ownership rates have fallen.
Yeah.
As well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece that we need to address as we're looking at housing production, is about jobs and business and, supporting the small businesses that make up the backbone of our community. So that's kind of one of my takeaways on this.
Yes, I mean, we could solve the affordable housing crisis with increased incomes as well that would support the rents that are currently in the market.
It's not only a housing problem.
No, it's a problem of income inequality and, quite frankly, poverty.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we have less control over incomes than we do over our housing market, at least than we should over our rental housing market. And I can say that although I was low income from 2005 to 2016, if my rent had only gone up 25% rather than 70% in 4 years, not in 11 years, which is what we're looking at, I would have not fallen into that cost burden category. So, I mean, I absolutely agree that living wage jobs are a key component of this, but my takeaway is that we should have been doing more to regulate our rental market, and that's going to remain a priority for me.
A follow-up question on federal policy, because you kind of alluded to it. Do you anticipate the federal government changing the definition of who is cost burden? And I say that in light particularly of the HUD Secretary's recent announcement that he wants to give housing authorities he wants to raise rents on people as a way of, I guess, quote, alleviating dependency or whatever his convoluted logic. But if HUD ends up allowing rent increases, can we anticipate that will be accompanied by a redefinition of who's cost burden?
I think we could, Commissioner. I very well think we could. I wish I could tell you that I knew what to expect from HUD at this point, but I don't. I'm not as in touch with that.
So what I would say is, this reminds me a little bit of 30 years ago with another president declaring ketchup a vegetable to solve a nutrition problem in our schools. I think we have to be careful about allowing a redefinition of poverty or cost burden or anything else to change our priorities. So if there is a change in the formula, I think it would be helpful if you brought that to our attention, because ultimately I think we need to determine locally who is cost burden, and we may be less reliant on a national definition.
Yes, Commissioner, thank you.
I share that concern because I'm beginning to see rental ads that say you have to make twice what rent is. I feel like the new standard is definitely on the rise, and it doesn't leave much. There's not much left over for other essentials, let alone spending money at local businesses, which would support living wage jobs. So it's just really a vicious cycle.
Are we taking testimony, or are we just adopting the
Nope,
report?
it's a report. I'll entertain a motion.
I move the adoption of the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Fish?
Well, nice work, team. This is our third, fourth, fifth year? Third year. Thank you. This tradition began under then Housing Commissioner Dan Salzman in response to a desire to have more data and more information guiding our policy decisions. There's a lot of data in here. There's a lot of information. For me, though, there's a couple of pages which tell really the most important part of this story. Thank you again for an excellent presentation. I especially appreciate the renewed attention on permanent supportive housing as a key tool in our arsenal to attack street homelessness. And I look forward to working with the Bureau and the mayor to target the new resources that are in the mayor's proposed budget to address some of our most urgent needs. And I'm particularly interested in seeing the service dollars that the mayor is proposing to add be clearly segregated so we can accumulate them and then spend them strategically on the units that we have in the pipeline. So thank you for your good work. Aye.
You, Daly?
I'm losing my voice. Yeah, thank you for this report, and brace yourself for a deluge of questions from me and my office. Sorry, not sorry. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you. This is another excellent report, and it continues to emphasize how people of color are disproportionately impacted by high cost burden for housing, how different areas of the city are gentrifying continually. I think we need to be mindful, particularly in East Portland, of following these Portland Action Plans suggestions for how to excuse me, reduce that gentrification and displacement. I do think that we need to look at, continue to look at economic development as a tool to address housing costs. And thinking back to the recession when we were using President Obama's stimulus package of $500 million, which Mayor Sam Adams was able to get, and that was partly what kept us from doing even worse, because we had all those good construction jobs, and yet now we've got all these good construction jobs doing all manner of things, and it doesn't seem to have rebounded. In fact, it's continued to get worse. So that's an unexpected. I think the trends have been similar over the past several years, so I wasn't as surprised by that. I was certainly chagrined that we're not doing better, but for the income stuff was what jumped out at me. The other really interesting thing in your presentation today was right at the beginning when you said there are 264,000 households in Portland. And when we vote on the comprehensive plan in the end of May 24th, we will have the capacity to have 249,000 more units. We'll be adding 39,000 more zoned capacity. So we'll have the zoned capacity to almost double the number of households. The challenge is what income level are they going to be built at, and how quickly can we encourage that zoned capacity to get built? I think that with the choices we've made in the comprehensive plan and putting density in the right place, that we will see, hopefully, as the economy starts to slow down, construction start to pick up because of those that increased zone capacity. But we'll have to all keep working on it. Thank you very much, both of you, for your work. Aye.
Wheeler?
Love the report. Thanks. I vote aye. We're adjourned.
Commissioner Fritz?
Yeah.